Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we talk about building wealth through opportunities in real estate. And today we have a really awesome story, a former firefighter and paramedic, now turned real estate investor. So we've got Seth Teagle here, and a little bit about Seth. So he is now resides in Columbus, Ohio, formerly from North Dakota. And he's passionate about creating generational wealth for the Stream Group, where you serve as CEO. And the Stream Group currently has about $186 million of assets under management, apartment complexes, different class properties, and that sort of thing. Became a lieutenant, and now you got into the real estate industry as a way to build wealth after being in a physically demanding job and being able to have, some opportunities in the future. Your first deal you did was a 50-unit acquisition. We'll get into that in a second. That helped yield you $1 million. You also work on educating people, so you're passionate about helping others through the Firehouse Bros, a multifamily education platform. So that is, in a nutshell, you. Welcome, and we're so excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Why don't you just share a little bit? We were chatting offline about the 50-unit deal, how you got into starting real estate. Why don't you maybe just back up a half step, share about your background and kind of what drove you into getting into real estate, and then we'd love to hear specifically kind of that first deal and how it got going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I grew up in Minot, North Dakota, was graduated high school there, was looking to get into doing something different or get out of that environment. I grew up in Minot. My brother was like one of the rock star baseball players. Everybody knew him, and I lived under his shadow for a long time. So I was ready to, besides just the extremely cold winters, I was ready to get away from that. So I packed up and moved to Florida. I had a friend of mine who his parents were at the Minot Air Force Base, and then they got stationed down in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And so after high school, I moved down there, lived there for about 8 years. And while I was there, got into college. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but got into the fire service and just loved it. Loved the whole team aspect of it, and helping people. And it just hit a lot of things that I enjoyed. So I did that 22 years. I should say fast forward from then until now. I just got out. June 3rd was my last day in the fire service, and ultimately I retired for real estate in the work we're doing with the company. But I also had 2 back surgeries in the last 6 months, basically job related. And so, thankfully I had real estate, right? So I'm not just like talking about it. I've lived it out, where real estate's really helped me continue to not have any kind of like lifestyle changes. But we were in Florida until about 2007, 2008-ish, moved to Ohio, and left the career I had there, moved up here, got on full-time at a department, and was just working hard. We did 24 hours on, had 2 days off, rode the medic all the time, did engine, ladder, our station kind of touched everything. And the year that I really made the decision to get into something different was I had worked 1,000 hours of overtime that year. And my wife and I figured out at the end of the year, we're like, man, like that was just like a rough year. I was tired, I was crabby. Like we're just having, I wouldn't say issues, but just there's a lot of things going on. And we're like, well, what's the root of this thing? And when we actually sat down and thought about it, I had spent 6 months out of the 12 at the firehouse, like 24 hours was gone, like being deployed. And, I realized that my body wasn't going to be able to continue to do that. My mind wasn't, I was getting burnt out. At that time, we had 1 child we had twins on the way. And, I was working, trying to get ready for that, but it was like, this is just not sustainable. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how do I create a side gig or a hustle where I could have some income coming in, preferably passive. And I ran into or connected via, it was kind of like that MySpace time frame. Facebook was kind of taking off, with a gentleman that I'd gone to college with, and we were roommates for several years. And I went into the fire service. He went into real estate. He was originally going to be a realtor. And when I reconnected with him, he was a multimillionaire. He was doing wholesaling, flipping, hard money lending, all these different things. And I was like, what, how did he go from where I knew him from to that? Like that was crazy. And at that time in my life, $1 million just seemed like a pie in the sky number that I couldn't even fathom. And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, what basically, like, what happened? how did you get from where I knew you from to this? And so we had a conversation and he gave me some actionable steps to take. And basically when I would do one, then I would go back to him and say, okay, I finished that one. Now what? And I didn't realize at the time, but he was gauging my seriousness, and I do the same thing now to others because I have a lot of people that will reach out and they all want to know about what we're doing or how we did it or how'd you get from here to there. But when
Hmm.
we actually, when they realize it's work, they shy away or they like,
Yeah.
oh, or they get hooked on you can become a multimillionaire overnight kind of thing, or, real estate's an easy get rich quick situation, and
Yep.
it can happen, but it's also very like long term and thinking for the future and those kinds of things. So that's kind of how I got into real estate or why I got into it. That was, I think I had talked with Matt that one of the action items that he gave me was to find a local person that was in real estate, because he was like, I'm in Florida still. Because I had moved to Columbus and he had stayed there. But the steps were easy. I'll just go. It was read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So if any of your listeners haven't read that, they should check that out. Robert Kiyosaki changed my whole outlook on. That was the first time I'd ever heard about assets and liabilities and cash
Yep.
flow and all that stuff.
For me, that
And
was my eye doctor. My first appointment back when I went to college was the one that told me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So,
really,
yeah, yep.
yeah,
So
it's
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 funny how
a
that gets introduced into people's lives and how it changes it. Yep.
yeah, yep. And so it was that. Then he sent me an MP3 via email of this like 7-day course that he did on house flipping, and just listening to that and kind of a ton that I learned. It was my first like kind of behind the curtain look at like what real estate investing is really like, and that there's a system to it and how you do it and how you can be successful and scale and and then once I got that done and called him back, I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. Now what? He was like, okay, find a local mentor that you can kind of learn from or ask questions or kind of be the training wheels for you to kind of help you get over the analysis paralysis that most people feel when they're trying to get into real estate investing, or if it's their first big investment, they're super scared of like, well, all the bad stuff, right? Every person
Hmm.
they've ever known has always told them negative things about rentals or long-term real estate holdings or whatever.
Yep.
Uh, so I did that. I found a guy locally that was a contractor, met through just a random circumstance. And I ended up, when I met with him, I ended up hearing what his needs were was somebody to manage his projects and somebody trustworthy to manage his rentals. And I thought, well, shoot, I'm at the firehouse 24 hours a day, and then I've got 2 days off. I've got time. I have no
Hmm.
experience, but I've got time. So
Right.
I gave him my time for free, and I wanted on the job training. Like basically, he'd pick up my phone call, or we would, I'd get in the same room with him.
Hmm.
And so now we were in the same room. We're meeting regularly. We're doing leases. I'm learning all these things, and I had none of my own money at risk,
Yep.
and did that for about a year. At the end of that year, I realized I wanted to do multifamily. Having as many doors under one roof was the biggest way to scale. And at the time, I always thought I'd still be in the fire service. So I basically looked for the biggest building that I could afford, and I had no money. I didn't have a lot of money saved, but what I did have was equity in my home. So we
Hmm.
did a HELOC on our house, pulled out about $100,000, and then I went to another investor that I had met that had an older guy that had single family rentals and like duplexes and some small multi, and he had not refinanced those for years, and he had held them for, I think at that time he had them for about 12 or 13 years. So I kind of pitched him on the whole idea, and he did a cash out refi on his properties. And then
Hmm.
we took his money and my money. We went and bought the 50 unit. And so I gave him 50% equity. I took 50, and then I ran the deal, ran the property and did everything for the first year. And that's how I got the first one done.
So, in terms of picking that property, number one, I think there's a couple things to learn here. A lot of people like to start out single family duplexes, something like that. You were able to see the bigger picture and go plunk down a 50 unit building. And I also don't want to gloss over the work that you had to get up to that, finding a mentor, working with people, building relationships. So I think, like you said, a lot of times people think real estate could be get rich quick, but you spent a lot of time, put in a lot of effort. And I've talked with a few people who have kind of had that same mindset of, instead of doing the small stuff, let's just leap into something larger. So what was
Mhm.
it, as you're kind of analyzing the properties, what was it about this 50 unit deal that spoke to you to where you were really to kind of push your chips into the middle and move forward on it?
Yeah. So two things. One, the reason I wanted to skip the small stuff was because to me it was another job, right? And it put me in
Hmm.
the same place as I was I was working overtime or I'm doing, I'm renovating a house. It was another job for me. And I had to get big enough to where I could have enough money to pay people to manage or pay people to do construction or, to kind of help. So that's
Hmm.
a big reason why I wanted to go big. But this specific property, I went, it took a buying, I created a buying criteria. Like, here's kind of what I'm looking for. I took it to all the real estate offices in my local area because there's no, like in the county I live in, there's not a lot of commercial brokers. There are in like Columbus and, whatnot. But locally, like getting started, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know the lingo well enough. But I took
Hmm.
the buying criteria to these real estate offices and I said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. If something comes up, let me know. And so the person called me, and what I the limited amount that I felt like I knew was that you could force the appreciation, that the value of the property was based on the net operating income. And as long as you could increase that, then you would create value. And so this property I found, it was, it needed a lot of renovation. So I knew it was gonna be a heavier lift, which I was comfortable with because I had construction background. I had fire, I've done, fire inspections, building inspections. I knew the codes, like I knew what to do.
Hmm.
And so and then I went on, and found, like on, what do we use? Rentometer back then,
Yep.
of, trying to find out like what are the rents in the area. And the guy was like $200 under market. And now if he would have renovated it himself, he would have got that extra $200 a unit. So I knew there was a lot of upside. And then we also knew that we were buying it right, for the price. The cap rate was, I think they said it was like 7.5 back then, in that area. And he wanted like 2.1 million for it originally, and we were able to negotiate down to about 1.7. So, we were buying it right. Um, and that was it. I just believed in the upside. I believed in my skills and abilities, betting on myself I knew I was a sure thing that I would die before I let it not work out. And
Hmm.
then, we were putting it all on the line, and I really I didn't know any other way to do it, because that's I kind of feel like you either kind of go big or you go home, the old saying goes, and I could stay small, but again, I'm stuck in the rut of another job,
Hmm.
and going bigger was the only way I could really scale and get to where I wanted to go. So,
Yeah. And what year was this again?
that was 2015.
2015.
So
So
we're
what did your coworkers think as you're doing this stuff in addition to your job? Did they know a lot of what was happening on the side, or they didn't necessarily know what was happening on the side? I'm just curious to see, as they watched you grow and morph into, now you're getting into real estate investing. I'm just curious what their perception was.
Yeah, so some of them were, like, super supportive. There was other like, there's one guy who his dad had been in apartment investing for a long time, so he thought it was great. A couple
Hmm.
other guys that had, like, tried it before but got burned because they had bought in, like, D class areas or rougher areas because of the dollar amount per house, and they had really bad experiences, and so we talked to them, but a lot of people didn't say anything. I mean, obviously, they
Hmm.
knew. I mean, I was showing up with, scuff marks and cuts and bruises and, glue on my hands and different things because, again, on that first deal, I did a lot of sweat equity,
Hmm.
and was right there alongside the team of contractors I had trying to get it to be successful. And so, you know, I I I had an interesting dynamic. Some were happy, and then others got really jealous. And
Hmm.
it was not, as well received as I would have thought. And so I got to a point where I didn't even talk about real estate at the firehouse because,
Hmm.
there's just not everybody is happy for you and things go well, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yes.
I always am careful like who I call and celebrate something with because you tell the wrong person and they're negative or they immediately turn it around, or like you said, they secretly get jealous over your successes. And I saw a lot of that. So
Yeah. So now you've spent the time, you've done the work, you've increased the value, you were able to get $1 million cash out, right?
yeah.
And then how did that leverage into kind of the next property, and how did it grow from there?
Yeah. So we refinanced, pulled out the million, we paid ourselves back. So we got all of our initial capital out. We paid everybody else back that had, done additional capital for renovations and whatnot. Cause I got in undercapitalized, I didn't know any better, went
Hmm.
and was able to raise some private money. So everybody got their money back, and the remaining amount that we had left over, we went and bought another apartment complex. And that next one was a 38 unit. Did the same thing there, refinanced, and kind of like towards the end of that deal and the getting close to the refinance period, I thought, well, I've got so much money in these deals now, like I want to keep buying them, but my
Hmm.
money was tied up, and so I had some, but I didn't have enough to go take down another big complex. And I was just like, this is such a scalable, like I wanted to keep doing it, and I bought in, and so that kind of led me to syndications and, creating the company, and then I met with and my main partner, Tim Shaw, which he's also a firefighter here in the Columbus area, and he
Hmm.
was in a commercial real estate, but he was brokering things and kind of on the transactional side of things, contracts. But he's very, very knowledgeable, like one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And so when we finally sat down to talk, we were like, we could really explode this thing if we team up together and go, because I had the knowledge of like kind of on the ground running it, and he had a lot of the acquisition knowledge, the underwriting knowledge, like more, we both do, but the way we have it set up now is I do kind of like back of the napkin underwriting. I find the deals, I work with the brokers and whatnot. And then as long as it meets our criteria and I sign off on them, like, yep, this looks like a good deal. I send it to Tim and then he does the deep dive into the underwriting and
Hmm.
does the contract stuff and puts our LOI together and deals with the side of things.
So you had mentioned early on about getting a mentor. Talk about that. Like, so as you're advising people on, getting into real estate, what advice would you give them in terms of, finding a mentor or even just getting familiar with the industry, that sort of thing? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing that you can do if you're trying to get started and you don't know a whole lot is to find somebody doing what you want to do and get in the same room with them, whatever that takes. And that's what partially why we created the Firehouse Bros is because we want to create that environment where, if you're a single family house flipper and you're like, man, I love to get into commercial real estate, but I just don't, again, it's making the leap into, real estate investing in like the first one, like the first home purchase is super scary, but it's also scary for people that have been in real estate for a long time and they've kind of got their niche. They flip 20 houses, 50 houses, whatever, but there's just like a mental block knowing that they are believing them in themselves that they can go into a bigger property and run it. And, I think for me, the time I spent working for Steve, managing his properties and running his stuff, like I learned a ton there, but it gave me the confidence I needed to make the jump into actually buying something. And so that's part of it. The other part of it of finding a mentor or getting into the room of folks doing things bigger than what you're doing is that just it eliminates the mindset of the limiting beliefs, the mindset where you can't do it or you're not sure. um and for me I kind of compare it to like if you go to like out, I mean, I will just say Disney because I just took my kids to Disney in February.
Hmm.
But when you go there and you pay for a fast pass or whatever it's called now, Genie Plus, it's expensive, but what you're buying is time, right? And if you don't buy it, you're going to get on that same ride that I went on, but you're just going to be 2 hours behind me. And while you're waiting in line to get on that ride, we've been on that one plus five others. And so
Hmm.
that's the way that I view it. And I always kind of tell people is like, look, you can get where you're going by yourself for sure. You can figure it out, but you can either pay somebody or jump, get into like a mastermind or get into a group of people that are doing, like already doing what you want, and you'll get to the level you want to 10 times faster with less mistakes, less money lost, because you've surrounded yourself with people that are already doing what you want to do. And, if I could have found somebody back, in 2015 that was buying apartments that would have taken me under their wing and said, hey, they could have told me before I closed on that deal, you're undercapitalized. Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about that? Hey, what about this? Maybe they
Hmm.
look at the property and they're like, hey, you missed this in the CapEx budget. You're going to be way under, you're not going to have enough money or any of those things. And that's really what I think finding a mentor does for you, on whatever level you're trying to get in, whether you're just trying to break into the industry or you're in it and you're trying to get to a new level. Finding somebody that's doing what you want to be doing and then doing whatever it takes to get in the room with them is super important. And it's led to our growth. I mean, I went from no real estate to $186 million that we oversee,
Hmm.
1,500 doors. And we have a management company now. We have a construction company. We employ about 20 people. How do you go from nothing to that in 7 years? Well, that's how, is getting in the right rooms with the people doing more than I'm doing. And I learn from them. And some people I've had to pay, it doesn't matter. Like I knew where we wanted to go, where I wanted to go. It's led to complete financial freedom. It got me out of my W-2, all the things that we've ever wanted, we've been able to do. And it's just because, like I said, the taking a chance and then being in the right room is super important.
And you hit the nail on the head about you have to pay for it or be willing to pay for it, because I think for some people they see, oh, that person's just trying to sell me something. And when you find the right person, like you had mentioned, somebody who's doing what you're already doing, You want to find a place to invest that money wisely. You could go blow all your money tomorrow on coaching and training programs and mentoring and all that. So there's plenty of opportunity out there, but it's finding the right people and vetting out the right people.
Yeah.
And it's worth investing your money. And you have to look at from their perspective too. They're giving you their time, they're giving you their knowledge that they've spent years and years building. So they should be able to charge for that, right? And so don't look at it as an expense into your education, an investment in your education, not necessarily like, oh, that person's just trying to get me, when you choose the right person, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're, if you see an ad on Facebook and it's like, hey, my 7-day course, and they send you a bunch of videos, whatever, like that's great, but there's no follow-up, right? And there's no like people just need I wouldn't say necessarily hand holding, but they just need, some people do, but they need training wheels. They need an environment where they can learn and be safe, and they're not having a ton of stuff at risk. Like I said, if you like, we've got a $300 a month program that people can join, and it just gets them in the room with us, right? And like you said, I'm doing 1,000 different tasks, and I have to dedicate time to each of those tasks. Well, I don't have time anymore to go have coffee with people and go have lunch with people and just go do things, like casually, because my time is so, there's only so many hours in the day, and my focus has to be on specific items that generate revenue. And so for me to take an hour or 2 hours out of my time and give it to somebody, they're, it's just, there's no other way to do it. And like I said, anybody that's really doing anything is going to require something. I mean, to me, $300 a month is nothing to get into the right room with folks that are doing what you want. And, whether you have a 4-unit now and you want to buy a 10-unit, you know, even just our network, the network that you get exposed to, that you get involved with, because that's the other part of it that people don't think about is if you get into the right room with the right people, then you're kind of vetted, or you get credibility based on they're already credible, and not, and people in the market or area industry know them. And for them to make a phone call for you, or for you to just be able to say, hey, Seth Teagle told me to give you a call. Oh, Seth, okay, boom, you've already moved to the front of the line as far as credibility goes. Whereas, you call they may not take your phone call. So all of those things. But yeah, I mean, I have thrived on getting myself in the right room. The company has exploded because of that. That's how we view things.
Talk a little bit about, because you guys are now larger scale, and I don't want to gloss over for the person that's just getting started in investing. They look at somebody like you and it's like, oh, $186 million. I could never do that, or that's too big for me. So I don't want to gloss over, like, you did your time, you put in a lot of work to get there. And like you said, it's finding the right people, building the great relationships. And you're a great example of, yeah, you don't have to do a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex to get started. You could. So now moving up, we're talking about your company, $186 million under management. How do you guys select your locations of where you're looking to buy properties?
So we've done a lot of stuff just locally here in Central Ohio, because our market is very strong. It's, it cash flows very well. We have a plethora of Class A, Class B, Class C, like whatever we want to get into. And then, and that's not just the metro area. I mean, there's all kinds of tertiary markets around Columbus that are thriving because Columbus is doing so well. So because, it trickles out into these outerlying areas. And so, we've done a lot of stuff locally, which is where our management company is based out of, and our construction company. But then we've done other stuff in other states where people have called us and said, hey, I've got a deal. And, we had somebody call us with a deal outside of Minneapolis, 86 units. And they're like, hey, we'd be looking to have somebody kind of co-GP with us, or I found this deal. I think it makes sense. I don't really know what to do with it now that I found it. Can you guys help? And so we've done that. We have gotten more assets under management that way as well, where we can bring in the structure and the systems and the knowledge. We can get the loan done. We can get all those things done, and remove those barriers, because that's part of the problem too, is if you want to go it alone, it is going to take you a long time to get to that 50 unit or 100 unit or whatever, because the lenders require a certain amount of net worth and liquidity that most people don't have when they're starting out, or even when they have small, they have small stuff. And so that's, like I said, that's the beauty about doing syndications or bigger properties is, there's enough equity to go around for people that where it makes sense. And it only takes one apartment complex deal for people to, to leave their W-2. Like if, because most of the time when you do them, there's an acquisition fee that's paid out to the people that, found the deal. had all the at-risk capital. They have, and they do all the upfront work, and then they present the deal to investors. People invest alongside of us. And then there's a fee that we charge for that, which is, it's nominal in the grand scheme of things. But, if you were able to do one deal, that could be like I've always asked people, like, well, what's the dollar amount you need to leave your job? And if you could put one deal together, that one deal, big enough could eliminate that, where at least for 1 year, you're done. And I can just tell you that from even my own experience, right, that I kept my job while we were building this company, but since I've left, I mean, just the amount of work we've gotten done, or just the mindset shift, the things that have happened since in the last 30 days for me, is I thought I was already crushing it. And just to have that, like, I burned the boats. I can't go back. I'm too old. I can't go back to the fire service in Ohio. My back is bad, so again, had I not had the real estate, I'd have been in trouble. So that's the thing I want people to think about, is that, you can definitely do it. I think, and just being around the right people is super important.
Yeah. And I've heard that from a lot of people too, kind of the burn the boats mentality, right? Like, you're never going to treat real estate, whatever shape or form you're in real estate, the same way until you know that this is your all-in moment. If you still have your plan B, your backup. Now, you were able to do that because you wanted to move into real estate, but for a lot of people, it's almost like they have one foot in two different boats.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem that you have, is you're kind of, I mean, there's real estate agents. This is actually why I started the podcast to begin with, is there's people that have been in real estate for 20 years as real estate agents. And they're like, oh, I really have always wanted to get into investing. It's like,
yeah,
you've been in the market for 20 years. You have all the tools and resources. You have all the vendor relationships. You have all the market knowledge. Like, what's stopping you? It's because they're not willing to take a risk. And so that's where it's the, like you said, the burn the boats mentality of like, okay, this is where I want to go. I'm going to be all in. Maybe you're not there yet, but you're willing to go all in to get there.
Yeah. And I think that it's two things that people talk about. Like, you'll hear people talk about, oh, burn the boats, leave your W-2. Like, you got to have a plan, right? And that's the thing, is like, one, do you want to leave? I could have left earlier, but I loved what I did. I loved the guys I worked with. Like, I didn't really want to leave. I didn't have I wasn't like in corporate America, miserable, like hate my job every day I wake up. Like, that wasn't my feelings towards what I was doing. So, people that feel that way are highly motivated to get into something else. And I think that they're pushed into making the transition faster because of, the alternative is being miserable every day. But like the realtor example is, that's also a reason why, passive investing into like syndications is a great alternative as well, because you can still put your money to work in real estate, but you can focus on being a realtor, right? Because if you're again, if you're small and you have, let's say you have 5 rentals, you may not be making enough cash flow to pay a management company or to pay for maintenance folks the way that you should. And so that's how either two things, maintenance gets deferred, or now instead of selling a house, you're stuck going over and like painting an apartment, or whatever. And that's where, like, to me, like, the horror stories come from. Or like, if you're crushing it in the real estate world as a realtor, why not take some of your money and put it into a syndication where it's working for you, it's in real estate, it's hedging against inflation, it's you're in the vehicle of using real estate as a vehicle for the investment, but you're not having to actually do any of the work, and you can focus on what you do best, which would be selling houses, and that's really, like, a lot of the people that we have invest with us, that's just it. Like, they love what they do. They have a great business or a career, and they understand that real estate's a great vehicle, but they don't want to, like, stop what they're doing to go do it. And, so and that's what I love about real estate too. There's all kinds of different ways to get involved. You can be active, you can be passive, you can be small, you can be big, you can do whatever you want to. My end goal for me was to buy my time back with my family, that if I wanted to go to Florida for a month, that the business would just keep on doing its thing, and I could work remotely from wherever. Like, if I wanted to take my kids to Europe, or I wanted to go to Utah and go out in the mountains out there with them or whatever for a few weeks, like, I could do that, and the business will just keep on going with or without me. And if you're small and everything depends on you doing it, you can't do that, so you're kind of trapped.
Chat a little bit here, as we kind of wrap up. Talk to me about, for people that want to learn more about you. We haven't really talked about kind of Firehouse Bros. Talk a little bit about the education that you're doing, how you're helping others. And like you had already kind of referred to, people can, do coaching with you at $300 a month or something like that. But talk a little bit about, what you've got going, how people can reach out to you and get involved if they want to learn more.
Yeah, so Firehouse Bros, we started because we loved educating people when we were in the fire service. I was a fire instructor, so I taught a lot of classes at the fire academy and new people coming into the fire service. I was an EMS instructor, so if you went to medic school, you would have had me as an instructor. And I loved like watching the light bulb come on for people that were getting into the industry. And we just, Tim was doing the same thing. And so for us, it was a nice pairing where, we have a lot to offer people as far as, if you're an experienced real estate person, but you don't know how to work bigger multifamily or commercial and you want to get into it, we can help bridge that gap. If you're new into real estate and you're like, hey, I know it's a good opportunity, but I don't really know where to like get started. We have people on our team that can work with you through that. And so it's like I said, to me, I think of it as more as like we're trying to be the training wheels for folks so that they're not, because once you put your money into the deal, if you don't know what you're doing and that's where it's at risk, you could lose it. Getting in the right room with people that can help teach you or coach you along and kind of be those training wheels, it makes it a safe environment for you to learn and learn faster than you going out and doing it on your own. So right now we have it's a 2-day event. The next one will be September 8th and 9th of this year, and it's $100, but it gives you like a 10,000 foot view of commercial real estate, how you can get involved, underwriting, brokers, have all kinds of different people that kind of pop in. So it's not like just me talking for 2 days. And it shows you like our network and what the benefit is. And then if you're like, hey, I think that this is something I want to get into, then you can jump into the command center, which is $300 a month. And it puts you like on our weekly calls. If there's specific things that come up where whether you're small or you're big, we can help remove the roadblocks basically of what you're doing. And sometimes it's just mental, sometimes it's, hey, I got this deal that I'm trying to close. I can't get, the loan done. Do you know anybody that can get the loan done for me? Well, hey, let me connect you with this person. And again, you have that, you're vetted by me. So they know, like I said, when you call them, they're going to take your call and they're going to like, oh, okay, yeah, that's great. And so it's just, we wanted to create that kind of environment and create a culture of success where, we are just kind of putting it together, but helping other people that are wanting to get in or want to get bigger or, whatever their end goal is, help them meet that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. It's a inspiring story to see how you got started and not to gloss over a lot of hard work along the way, a lot of challenges. So thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, for our listeners, make sure that you check them out because 2 days for $100, that's a great value to be able to find out if it's something that's a fit for you. So thanks so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.